it's really important to think about the long-term future, because it's in the long-term future that there are possibilities that can be explored and set up over a long period of time. I think the education sector in New Zealand has suffered from very short cycles of attention span, and that is not helpful when you're looking at strategic alignment, when you're looking at coherence in the system. You need a longer time frame to work on that, to build the commonality of thought between organisations that might initially be seen as not having any common ground at all. Well, schools are the place where change is happening very, very quickly. So our sector, particularly with teenage students, that is the face of change. You're in touch with the future on a daily basis, and therefore the need to prepare better and to keep engaged with that in a very open-minded way. It's quite interesting to listen to the ways in which Secondary Futures has been described. Secondary Futures is a very unusual model. I don't think there's a precedent for having an organisation that has 4 guardians, kaitiaki, and a touchstone group and a secretariat that each bring quite different views to the table and serve quite different purposes. But if you manage to get, as we have managed to, those roles working in sync, which doesn't mean it's always very comfortable, because I think there have been moments where ideas have been challenged, but if they can be challenged and then acted upon or taken somewhere in a constructive way, then that's a very useful model to employ. It's been important, the opportunity for different voices to come to the table with not just one particular very limited agenda item, and as is usually the case. And when you have one particular agenda item, historically what's happened is you have one particular position taken by people, and that's not always terribly helpful. So it was different, this model, because it wasn't a very, very narrowly focused agenda, but it was also different in the voices that were at the table. So I think it would be fair to say that in the high levels of debate on education in New Zealand, that students, for instance, and beginning teachers have not always had a legitimate spot at the table. The risks of not having that face-to-face engagement in a safe place where ideas can be challenged and where people have the chance to listen and change their stances on issues is that we revert to a particularly unhelpful model that we have had in existence in New Zealand in education. People working in a fragmented sector where lots of people are very busy on things that should be connected that aren't, and where coherence and collaboration, or the potential for collaboration, remains unexplored, and the destructive nature of competition and fragmentation really holds sway, and that's not good for anybody. I think the tools and ideas that Secondary Futures have come up with have provided me with an opportunity to go back and test with both students and teachers what their appetite is for discussions around the future. And what's been heartening is that in both schools, the students and the teachers have been quite hungry for a sensible and constructive debate around those things. And the same has happened within PPTA. We have had a long history of leading thinking in education and leading change, and so with many of our members, they have had the opportunity to think about change for over the next 20 years and have been able to take that somewhere very constructive in their own practice, but also in discussions with boards of trustees and their communities, and particularly with the New Zealand curriculum and the implementation of it. I think we all have aspirations now, many more of them are shared, of what we don't want it to be. We don't want students to be isolated with a bit of technology as their only connection to the rest of humankind. We do understand the value of relationships and the value of the importance of teachers and the time and effort that they put into making things work in terms of learning. How that actually works, I don't think there's a dot to dot. Well, if there is, we may only be able to see it retrospectively. What's important is to reach some agreement on fundamental principles. I'm a determined optimist when it comes to the future of education, because that's what you need to be. My name is Kate Gainsford and I'm President of the New Zealand Post-Primary Teachers Association.